The room went quiet the moment he walked in with a mop, not the polite kind of quiet, not the respectful pause people give when someone important enters. This was the other kind. The kind where 200 people in evening gowns and tailored suits suddenly become very interested in their champagne glasses, because looking directly at the man pushing a janitor's cart through the service entrance of the Hargrove Grand Ballroom would require acknowledging that he existed. And acknowledging that he existed would require a certain kind of humanity that on this particular Friday night in October was in short supply. His name was Clifton Reese, 61 years old, 6 feet even, though the years had pulled his shoulders into a slight forward curve that made him look shorter. His uniform was gray, the kind of institutional gray that exists in no other context, the color of bureaucracy and invisibility. His name was stitched above the left breast pocket in block letters, C. Reese. Not Clifton, not Mr. Reese. Just the initial and the last name, because that was the amount of personhood the building management had decided to allocate to him when they issued the uniform. Clifton Reese moved through the room the way he always moved, slowly, deliberately, with the unhurried pace of a man who has learned that rushing only makes other people feel better. He guided the cart past the ice sculpture near the east wall. He skirted the edge of the string quartet's platform. He paused near a toppled appetizer plate. Someone had knocked to the floor near table 11 and crouched down with the quiet efficiency of a man who had been doing this for 3 years and had made his peace with it, mostly. He hadn't always pushed a mop, but we'll get to that. The event was called the Chambers Foundation Gala. It happened every October at the Hargrove Grand, always on the third Friday, always with the same donor list, always with the same speeches about opportunity and giving back and the power of community, delivered by people who had not set foot inside an actual community in a very long time. The foundation's founder and chairman was a man named Aldrich Chambers, not the Aldrich Chambers in the file of names you might be thinking of, but a different one entirely. A man who had built a real estate empire across 6 southern states starting in his 30s and had spent the decades since trying to launder his reputation through philanthropy. Aldrich Chambers was 64. He had the particular bearing of a man who had never once waited for anything. Not a table, not a car, not a response to an email. His hair was silver and precisely cut. His suit was the color of a storm front. He moved through the room with a proprietary ease, touching the backs of chairs as he passed them, nodding at faces, pausing occasionally to shake a hand with both of his, the way politicians do when they want you to feel chosen. He noticed Clifton Reese the way you notice a piece of furniture that's been moved 2 inches from where it usually sits. A flicker of awareness, a small tightening around the eyes. Then he looked away. There was a grand piano on the north end of the ballroom, a Steinway Model D, 9 feet long, lacquered black, positioned on a low platform just inside the main entrance archway. It had been placed there for the evening's featured performance, which was scheduled for 8:30. A young pianist from the Atlanta Conservatory who had won 2 regional competitions and whose publicist had described him in the event program as a rising star of American classical music. The young man's name was in the program. The piano's name, had anyone thought to give it one, would have been something like Patience, because that is what it had been doing for the past 2 hours while the gala filled up around it, waiting, with the particular stillness of something that knows its moment is coming. Clifton Reese finished clearing the debris from near table 11. He straightened up. He pushed the cart a few feet. He stopped. He was standing 10 feet from the piano. He stood there for a moment that was longer than a janitor's pause usually is. His eyes, dark, deep-set, with the particular quality of eyes that have seen things they can't unsee, moved to the Steinway. Just moved there, quietly, without his... He stepped toward it. Later, people would say he should have known better. They would say it with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been in a room where the thing you spent 40 years of your life doing is sitting right in front of you, silent, waiting, and you haven't touched one in 3 years. Clifton Reese sat down on the bench. He didn't play. He just sat there for a moment with his hands in his lap, his gray uniform, his cart a few feet away. His eyes closed. Anyone watching might have thought he was resting, but rest was not what this was. This was something closer to grief. The way grief sometimes looks from the outside like stillness. Then his right hand moved to the keys. He placed it there gently, not pressing. Just the weight of his hand resting on the ivory, he played one note. Middle C soft, barely audible under the hum of the room. Then the chord, then the phrase. It was Chopin, the Nocturne in E-flat major, Opus 9, number 2. The one that starts so quietly, you almost think you imagined it, and then opens up like a door into a room you've been trying to find for years. Clifton Reese played the opening phrase with his eyes still closed, and the strange thing, the thing that a few people standing near the north end of the ballroom would describe later, trying to explain it to people who hadn't been there, was that the sound changed the room. Not dramatically, not like a thunderclap, more like the way temperature changes when a cloud moves off the sun. Something shifted. 3 people mid-conversation lost their train of thought. A server paused with a tray in her hands. The string quartet, on break, looked over. Clifton Reese's hands remembered everything. The fingers that had spent the morning scrubbing tile and the afternoon hauling trash bags moved across the keys with the kind of authority that doesn't come from practice. It comes from decades before practice, from something that exists beneath muscle memory, in the part of a person that doesn't change no matter what uniform they're wearing. Aldrich Chambers heard it from across the room. He turned. He saw the gray uniform. He saw the service cart. He saw the man sitting at his $8,000 a night piano. His piano, as he thought of it, because he had rented it. Because renting a thing apparently grants a certain kind of ownership in some men's minds. And something moved across Aldrich Chambers' face that was not one emotion but several at once. Outrage was the loudest, but underneath it was something else, something smaller and older and less comfortable to name. He crossed the room. He crossed it fast. Hey! His voice cut through the Chopin the way a car horn cuts through a song on the radio. Hey, stop that. Clifton Reese's hands stilled. He opened his eyes. Aldrich Chambers was standing 3 feet away. His jaw was set. His eyes had the particular flatness of a man who has decided in advance of any conversation how it is going to end. Get up, Chambers said. Clifton Reese looked at him for a moment. He didn't move immediately. Not from defiance, exactly, but from the considered unhurried stillness that was simply how he moved through the world. Then he stood, slowly, and faced Chambers. I apologize, Clifton Reese said. I shouldn't have. No, Chambers said. You shouldn't have. You absolutely should not have. He looked down at the piano keys, the way you look at something that's been contaminated. Do you have any idea what this instrument costs? Do you have any concept of? He stopped. He looked at Clifton Reese's hands. What were you even doing? You could have damaged the action. You could have. The action is fine, Clifton Reese said quietly. Chambers blinked. The keys are fine, Reese said. The action is fine. I didn't damage anything. The calmness of it seemed to be the wrong response. Chambers' expression shifted. The outrage sharpened into something more personal. I don't care, Chambers said, louder now. The nearest cluster of guests had turned. 2 women near the bar. A man in a blue blazer, a couple at table 4 who had set down their forks. I don't care if the keys are fine. You don't touch things that don't belong to you. You don't sit down at a piano at a private event and... He shook his head. Who let you in here? What company are you with? Hargrove Building Services, Reese said. I'm going to call your supervisor. That's your right. Something about that answer, the quiet steadiness of it, the absence of apology or performance, seemed to land wrong on Chambers. He stepped closer. You got something to say to me? Chambers said. No, sir, because the look on your face, I don't have a look on my face. You're standing there like I'm in the wrong. Like you. Chambers stopped. He seemed to remember suddenly that there were 200 guests in the room, some of whom were now watching with the focused attention of people who have decided this is more interesting than the appetizers. He lowered his voice. He didn't lower it enough. Get your cart. Get out of this wing. And if I see you in this room again tonight, I'm having you removed from the building. Do you understand me? Clifton Reese looked at Aldrich Chambers for a long moment. Not with anger, not with fear, with something that was harder to categorize, the look of a man who has encountered a very specific kind of ignorance before, so many times that it no longer surprises him, but still, even now, after all of it, still costs him something to absorb it. Yes, Clifton Reese said, I understand. He took the cart. He walked toward the service corridor. His back was straight. His pace was the same unhurried pace it had always been. He did not look back. In the corridor outside the ballroom, Clifton Reese set the cart against the wall and stood still for a moment with his hands at his sides. The sound of the gala filtered through the door. Laughter, crystal, the distant resumption of the string quartet. Ordinary sounds. The sounds of a world that had just looked directly at him and decided he was furniture. He had been a furniture once, too, in a different sense. A fixed point in a room that people oriented themselves around. But that was before the diagnosis, before the 2 years of treatment, before the slow, grinding process of returning to something that resembled normal life, and discovering that normal life, when you returned to it, sometimes looked very different from the one you'd left. Before the conservatory position that had quietly evaporated during his absence. Before the letters he'd written that went unanswered. Before the morning, 2.5 years ago, when he had looked at the balance in his checking account and at the job listing for building services, and made the decision that a man who needed to eat did not have the luxury of dignity as a fixed line item. Clifton Reese had spent 22 years as a concert pianist, not a local talent, not a regional success story, a concert pianist, the kind whose name appeared on programs in Carnegie Hall and the Kennedy Center and the Barbican in London. The kind who had performed command performances for visiting heads of state, whose recordings were in the permanent collections of the Library of Congress, who had taught master classes at Juilliard when he was 34, and received a standing ovation from the students, which was not the kind of thing that happened in master classes at Juilliard. He had played for 3 U.S. presidents, not performed at galas, played, privately, intimately, in the East Room of the White House, invited by name, received with the particular warmth that institutions reserve for people they recognize as genuinely rare. His recordings existed. His reviews existed. The programs with his name on them existed, archived in the places that archive such things. None of that was visible on a gray uniforms with C-Rees stitched above the breast pocket. Back in the ballroom, Aldrich Chambers accepted a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server and resumed his circuit of the room. The incident at the piano had already begun receding in his mind, already being filed under something dismissible, something handled, something not worth carrying into the rest of the evening. He found his way to the cluster of guests near the stage, his foundation's board members, 2 state senators, a woman named Dolores Fitch, who ran the largest private arts endowment in Georgia, and beside her, a man named Leonard Cross. Leonard Cross was 70 years old. He was short, deeply creased, with the eyes of a man who has spent a lifetime paying attention to things other people miss. He was the music director emeritus of the Atlanta Symphony and had been for 40 years one of the most respected voices in American classical music, not because he was famous exactly, but because the people who were famous in that world knew his name, and when he said something was good, it was good, and when he said something was missing something, you went home and found what it was. Cross had been standing near the north end of the ballroom when Clifton Reese sat down at the piano. He had heard the Chopin. He had heard it with the specific and total attention of a man who has been listening to piano music for 60 years and knows, with the certainty of someone who has spent a lifetime developing the capacity to hear it, exactly what he is hearing. And what he heard in those 40 seconds before the interruption was something he had not heard in a very long time. He had watched Aldrich Chambers cross the room. He had watched the whole of it without moving. Now, standing in the cluster near the stage, Cross looked at Chambers with the expression of a man deciding something. "Aldrich," Cross said. "That man you just removed from the piano." Chambers turned. His expression said, "We are not still talking about this." "I handled it," Chambers said. "I know you handled it," Cross said. "What I'm asking is, do you know who he is?" A small pause. Chambers' confidence did not waver. Men like Chambers have practiced the art of the unwaveringly confident pause, but something behind his eyes flickered. "He's building services," Chambers said. "He's Clifton Reese," Cross said. The name landed in the cluster of guests the way a stone lands in still water. The 2 state senators exchanged a look. Dolores Fitch set down her champagne. Chambers' brow furrowed. "That name means, it means," Cross said quietly, "that the man you just had removed from that piano is one of the finest American concert pianists of the last quarter century. It means he played the East Room of the White House 3 times. It means his recording of the Ravel concertos is what they play at the Juilliard orientation for incoming piano students as an example of what is possible." Cross paused. "It means that when that man played 40 seconds of Chopin just now, 40 seconds, Aldrich, I could hear every one of those years. The room, or this small corner of it, gone quiet. Chambers stood very still. "I didn't," he started. "I know," Cross said. "That's what I'm telling you." In the service corridor, Clifton Reese was finishing the evening's last scheduled rounds. He had 2 more trash pulls to complete, and then he was done. Could sign out, take the bus home to his apartment on Meridian Street, heat up whatever was in the refrigerator, and sleep. He was thinking about none of these things. He was thinking about the nocturne, the way it had come back. Not tentatively, not in the halting way of something forgotten and imperfectly retrieved, but all of it. The phrasing, the voicing, the particular way he had always played that opening right hand against a left that was slightly more present than most pianists would allow. It had come back the way breathing comes back after a long surface, not a choice, just the body insisting on what it knows. He hadn't meant to sit down, he still wasn't entirely sure why he had. 3 years of passing pianos in hotel lobbies and ballrooms and event spaces where his work took him, and he had never sat. Whatever it was that had moved him tonight, the quality of the light, maybe, or the particular pitch of the loneliness that had been accumulating quietly in him for months. He couldn't have named it exactly. It didn't matter. The moment was over. The cart was in front of him, and the corridor was quiet, and the evening was nearly done. The door at the end of the corridor opened. Leonard Cross walked through it. He was alone. He had his hands in his pockets, and his expression was the particular expression of a man who has chosen his next action carefully and is now committed to it. He stopped when he saw Clifton Reese. He looked at him for a moment in the flat fluorescent light of the service brisk corridor. "Mr. Reese," Cross said. Clifton Reese had not heard his name said that way, with that particular weight of recognition in a long time. Not C. Reese, not "Hey, Mr. Reese." He looked at the older man. "I don't know if you remember me," Cross said. "Leonard Cross. We met at Atlanta Symphony," Reese said, 2009, after the Brahms program. Cross almost smiled. "You remember. You told me my second movement was too comfortable," Reese said, "that I was playing it like I already knew how it ended." "And you were," Cross said. "And then you came back the following season and played it again, and it was entirely different, and I thought about that for a long time afterward." Clifton Reese was quiet. "I heard you," Cross said. "A few minutes ago, at the piano." Reese said nothing. 40 seconds, Cross said. "You played 40 seconds of the Chopin, and I knew. The way I know things in this field, which is the only way I know things, that I was hearing something real." He stopped. "What happened to you? You dropped out completely. The conservatory position, the tours, you just disappeared." Reese looked at the floor for a moment, then back up. "I got sick," he said. Cross nodded slowly. "Are you better? Better enough." Another pause. Cross looked around the corridor. The gray walls, the service cart, the plastic bags in the bin, the emergency exit sign buzzing faintly at the far end. "Come back inside," Cross said. Reese shook his head. "I was asked to leave the wing. I'm asking you to come back." "Chambers." "Aldrich Chambers is standing at the north wall of his own ballroom," Cross said, feeling something I suspect he has never felt before in his adult life. "And there is a Steinway Model D on a platform that has been waiting all evening for someone who actually knows what to do with it." He paused. "The conservatory pianist canceled. Overbooked. They called an hour before the event. The piano has been decorative all night." Clifton Reese said nothing for a long moment. He looked at the cart. He looked at the door, through which Leonard Cross had come. He looked at his hands. The hands that Aldrich Chambers had looked at with that particular brand of contempt that is worse than dislike because it is so uncurious, so completely uninterested in what those hands might actually be capable of. "The Chopin," Cross said. "Start where you started, or anywhere. I'll introduce you, whatever you want." "I don't need an introduction," Clifton Reese said. Cross looked at him carefully. "No," he said. "I don't suppose you do." Clifton Reese walked back through the service corridor door and into the ballroom. He did not change his clothes. He did not remove the gray uniform with C. Reese stitched above the left breast pocket. He walked through the ballroom in what he was wearing, and the 200 guests who had been milling and drinking and delivering and receiving the specific social performances required of this kind of evening turned to look at him, and the room did the thing rooms do when something unexpected is happening. It went still. Aldrich Chambers, standing near the north wall, saw him. Something moved across Chambers' face that had never crossed it before in 64 years. Clifton Reese walked to the Steinway. He sat down on the bench. He adjusted it slightly. 3 inches back, the way he had always preferred, which no one had ever had to tell him twice. He settled. He put his hands in his lap for a moment, the way he always did before he began, which some critics had described over the years as a kind of gathering, a collecting of intention. The room was very quiet. Then Clifton Reese put his hands on the keys and he played. He started where he had started before, the nocturne, the opening phrase, the E-flat. And this time there was no interruption and no cart and no service corridor waiting. There was only the room and the instrument and 40 years of a life that had not gone the way it was supposed to go and had produced, in spite of everything, or maybe because of everything, exactly this. He played the nocturne through to the end. Then, without pause, he moved into something else, a piece of his own composition, one he had written during the illness, during the months when he couldn't perform and could barely hold a cup, which he had written on paper first because his hands weren't reliable, and then, later, when they came back, played for the first time alone in the small apartment on Meridian Street. It sounded like grief and like gratitude, which is not so strange when you think about it, because grief and gratitude are very often the same conversation viewed from different angles. No one in the Chambers Foundation gala that evening had heard this piece before. No one anywhere had heard this piece before. They heard it now. A woman near table 6 pressed her fingers to her mouth. One of the state senators, a man who had been in rooms with every variety of human performance for 30 years and believed himself largely unsurprisable, found that he was not. Leonard Cross stood near the service corridor door with his arms at his sides and something in his expression that people who knew him well would not have recognized immediately, because it was not his critical face or his evaluating face. It was simply the face of a man who is grateful to be in the room. Aldrich Chambers did not move from the north wall. He stood there through all of it. When it ended, when the last chord resolved, and the sound folded into the room and was absorbed by the walls and the gowns and the marble floor and the 200 people standing in the silence that follows something real, Aldrich Chambers was still there. The applause, when it came from everywhere at once. Clifton Reese sat at the piano with his hands in his lap, the way he sat before he began, except that now it was after. His moved briefly to Aldrich Chambers across the room. Not in triumph, not in accusation. In the quiet, level way of a man who is done explaining himself. Leonard Cross reached Clifton Reese before most other people did. The composition, Cross said. Does it have a name? Not yet, Reese said. It needs one. Reese looked at him. I'll think about it. I want to record it, Cross said. I want to present it. I want. He stopped himself. We can talk later. Somewhere not here. He paused. I know 2 conservatory positions currently unfilled. I know 4 concert series that have been looking for exactly what you just played. He paused again. I know this is not a simple conversation. It isn't, Reese said. I know, Cross said. But it's a conversation worth having. Dolores Fitch from the Arts Endowment reached them then, and the senator, and a small press of other guests with the particular forward energy of people who have just witnessed something they didn't expect and want to attach themselves to it before it becomes only a story they tell. Reese accepted their words with the same steadiness he had brought to everything else that evening. Not performing gratitude, not performing humility, simply receiving what was being given. Aldrich Chambers made his way across the room. It took him longer than it should have. He moved slowly. The way men move when they are rehearsing something they cannot figure out how to say, through the crowd that had gathered around the piano until he was standing 2 feet from Clifton Reese. The room, or this part of it, quieted again, the way rooms do when they can sense something about to happen that they do not want to miss. Chambers looked at Clifton Reese. Reese looked at him. I didn't know, Chambers said. His voice had lost the authoritative flatness it had carried across the room an hour ago. It sounded different now, not smaller exactly, but less certain of its right to take up the space it was taking. Clifton Reese looked at him for a long moment. I know, Reese said. That doesn't. Chambers stopped. He tried again. That doesn't make it. No, Reese said. It doesn't. It was not forgiveness. It was not its absence. It was something more honest than either. The acknowledgement that what had happened, that no revision of the understanding could undo it, and that the 2 men standing in the wreckage of it would have to carry their respective portions of it separately, each in the way they were capable of. Chambers nodded once. He stepped back. He moved away through the crowd. Leonard Cross watched him go. What do you want to do? Cross said to Reese. Clifton Reese looked at the piano. Then at the room, the chandeliers, the guests, the marble, the gowns, the faces turned toward him with the particular attention of people who have just been reminded of something they knew and had forgotten. "I want to play something else," he said. Cross looked at him. Then he stepped back. Clifton Reese turned back to the Steinway. He sat down. He settled the bench. He put his hands in his lap for a moment. The room went quiet, and then he played.